This is our overview of developing a factorized neural process for K-shot prediction of neural responses. The motivation for this work is that while artificial neural networks can achieve remarkable performance at predicting the responses of neurons in the brain to visual stimuli, optimizing these models requires a time-consuming step which can prohibit their use in real-time experiments. And so we wanted to develop a rapid time inference approach to neural tuning functions as observations are being collected. One tool that seemed particularly well suited to this is the neural process, which, as described by Garnello et al., takes a meta-learning approach in order to perform few-shot function regression. Neural processes do this by embedding the set of input-output samples into a latent space that represents the function. However, we found that learning this embedding was difficult for neural responses. This motivated us to develop the factorized neural process. And our inspiration for this framework was Clint et al., which showed the benefits of factorizing the predictive model into a component for the receptive field location as well as the tuning function properties. So we augmented neural process with the deep set operator from Zahir et al. In order to produce a factorized latent representation of the tuning function. And this diagram on the top shows our overall framework. And we take the set of observed stimulus-response pairs and first pass those through a position encoder, which infers a latent representation for position. Then that latent variable is passed to the tuning function properties encoder, as well as all the observed samples, which then produces a second latent variable for the tuning function properties. These two latent variables are passed to a conditional decoder, which can then represent the tuning function and make predictions of the response to novel stimuli. I highlight a couple of points in the equations here, specifically that the encoders operate on individual samples of the stimulus response observations. And that was why it was so important to have this latent variable representation so the readout encoder could actually factor in the inferred tuning function position, and then that's used in the conditional decoder at the bottom. We then developed an approach for efficient training of these K-shot prediction functions, and found when tested on simulated responses that as the size of the observation set increased, the predictive accuracy also continued to increase. The latent variables also contained sufficient information to reconstruct the simulated receptive fields, which are shown in the left-hand column, with the right-hand block showing the reconstructed receptive fields for greater and greater numbers of observations, and also shows that these approach the ground truth with the 1,000 observations. Finally, we tested this algorithm on real mouse visual cortex data and found that the performance was comparable to models that are optimized on the individual neurons after the data is collected, and even exceeded the performance in the K-shot regime. Importantly, the inference takes orders of magnitude less time than optimization and allows making these predictions within the time of a single stimulus.